go. Hi, morning, Alan.
Good morning.
We finally made it.
Yes.
We have to apologize, I think, for everybody who accepted the event because of a wide variety of internet issues. I think we had to move this twice.
Yes, and all down to my internet issues, so my apologies to everyone for that. But we got there.
We got there in the end, yes. So today we thought we're going to spend half an hour talking about organizational culture. Everybody keeps talking about the culture of an organization and how important it is to change the culture of an organization. But there's very often a very fuzzy definition around what is culture, and then how do you actually do that? How do you actually change culture? So what we define as culture is an organization's beliefs and values. It's their ways of interacting and the ways an organization organizes itself to organize the work. All of that built together creates a sort of unique psychological environment for individuals and employees in their organization.
One of the questions I often ask organizations I find myself in is, what is your culture? Can you define it? And then, is it the culture you want, or is it the culture that's arrived by accident? And normally, the people I'm talking to struggle to answer those questions. They struggle to define what is the culture, and they struggle to define what is the culture they want.
Yes, and it's. I mean, there's so many markers of culture, that you could use. How do you communicate? Are you an emailing organization? Are you a IM organization, or are you an organization that actually values face-to-face interaction? How do you make decisions? Is it quick and easy and collaborative, or is there a ton of red tape? And then also, most importantly, what are the things that you accept as unchangeable?
Yes.
And this is really where we want to get in today. So what we find in our work as consultants, there are three main barriers that you can see in organizations which stand in the way of really influencing culture. And the first one is what we call the kill switch narrative. So this is the completely accepted reasons why change can't happen. Fantastic idea, but we just don't have the resources. That would be brilliant, but we don't have the budget to do that. We would love to do that, but the data just won't stand up to it, completely ignoring that you are the owner of the data. You can make it stand up to it. Those type of things.
Yes. I love the way you've defined it with the kill switch. It is so effective in describing what it is, because it just stops things from going forward completely. And then, of course, you've got the built-in barriers. You want to make a change happen. How do you actually bring that change forward? What's the process for bringing changes into the mainstream? Do you have to have MD in your title, or can anybody put these in for consideration? That's a very common barrier that you see. How do you get things to happen?
And some of it is, of course, due to the organizational structure and processes, but some of it is due to perception, or also the positioning of individual leaders. How have they positioned themselves, sometimes out of purely political considerations. I remember that I was working with a group, and they were insisting that a change to an administrative process, purely administrative process, purely in systems, needed to be discussed with the health and safety guy.
Yes. Yes.
Those type of things.
Yes, that's another barrier. You know, if you want to slow things down, then involve some red tape, some peripheral activity. Not to say they're not necessary in lots of cases, but they need to be part of the change program rather than blocking. Okay, and then we've got the dilution confusion. You have to take a bit of a run up to say that.
It's this very much comes from a background as a project manager, where you see this all the time. When an organization gets going and they start wanting to change, what we do, especially with Lean, is we always focus on a small area to pilot, or we focus on incremental change, or in a project, you focus on a well-defined scope for your change. Then you bring the wider organization in and they go, oh, they come with a whole shopping list. Oh, but this would be great. And this would be fantastic. And let's do this as well. And what happens is that something well-defined then blows up into something completely unmanageable.
Yeah.
If you're trying to tackle it, your change is probably going to fail. Which then sort of plays into your kill switch narrative that change can never happen.
Yes. And with that one, you often end up disappointing a lot of people because they genuinely wanted or thought that their little bit of change was part of that project. So, yeah, 3 good reasons why the culture can act as a barrier to change. Even when individuals are possibly in favor of the change, the culture gets in the way. Should we look at each one in more detail?
Yeah, let's.
Okay. So the kill switch. I still like the title. It's quite dramatic.
It is. It's a really tricky one, and every organization has them. And interestingly, the kill switch is often a narrative that the sort of lower layers of the organization have developed to get leaders who are driving for change off their backs. So it's, have you ever in your life, in your 20 years of career in Lean and Change, met with a team who said, oh yeah, no, we want to change and we have all the resource and it's absolutely no problem to focus on the change?
I did once.
Well, once.
And what was interesting about that is they had gone through a rapid change of getting rid of their kill switch because their boss, an early adoptee of Lean, took them through exactly what you've written down here in terms of how to diagnose it. There was something about they couldn't do this because it meant sending a special transport for a delivery out to a customer. Mm-hmm. And the boss was saying, why not? Well, it's a special transport. Does the customer want it? Yes, they do. So why not send it? And he took them down to that sort of level. And it was quite a famous dialogue in the company. And they were open for change. You went in there and it was a case of, we don't have huge amounts of resource, but we're certainly going to give it a go. What change are we going to tackle?
Yeah, but it's rare. It's really rare. And the thing is, so this is the most typical kill switch narrative we see. It's the, we don't have the resource. It's a great idea, but we just don't have the time. We just don't have the resource. Or the we can't get the budget. Or, I mean, in modern days, data is a very typical kill switch. We can't get the data. We can't create the data. The data isn't there. The data doesn't exist. The data can't be trusted. Now, normally, when a team uses the kill switch, the leader will say, okay, yeah, no, I understand. I look away. But in order to change culture and to drive your change into the organizational culture, you want to break that kill switch. And you have to do that really carefully. You have to be really analytical. You have to ask a lot of good questions and focus on the sort of diagnostic language of root causing, and dial in, pinpointed questions, probe the reasons why, and then challenge carefully. Because the thing that can happen when a team uses a kill switch, they expect things to stop. This is the end of this conversation. This is not going to move forward. If you push too hard against it, then it can cause a sort of it can cause the fuse to what is it? What's the word in English?
Explode. Explode.
Yeah.
It goes bang.
And that's then when you get a lot of noise, escalations and those type of things.
Yes, it certainly can be investigated, and the simple questioning techniques used without emotion are by far the best way to dig into this and to find it. But the pushback is always, we don't have time to go into this. It's a well-accepted fact. Let's move on. But the interesting thing about the example that I just quoted earlier is that conversation between the boss and his team became part of the new culture. So it was a fairly substantial conversation that went on, but it was a very positive one. And it did form a part of a new culture. So you can turn these things around. In that particular case, it was quite a quick thing to do, but a very small organization, I admit.
I think the kill switch is probably the thing that once broken will remain broken most easily.
Yes.
Out of the three factors.
Yeah.
But let's look at the other two.
Yes. One last thing to say on kill switch is it gets used an awful lot in organizations. It's a surprise when you define it as a switch. It's a surprise that it doesn't get worn out, but it never seems to. It has to be dismantled.
It has to be dismantled, yeah.
Okay, right. Let's move on. The built-in barriers. Yes, I recognized these. The barriers that you have to simply to get change started. Oh, it's just too difficult. We can't do that. We tried it. Yes, it's far too difficult. We'd have to meet with these people, and the people who you have to influence always seem to be remote, difficult to get to. Yes.
And some of it can be true. I mean, I've worked in organizations where the president had to sign off every single bloody head count. So there are barriers which organizations create, which result from overcomplicated governance, and overcomplicated governance results from, in my view, a culture of mistrust and a culture of disempowerment of people who are actually in charge, which comes in from the top, especially in hierarchical organizations. But then there's also built-in barriers, which are perceived barriers, where you have a highly influential person who you think you will never get around to the change, so you don't even try. So you don't even talk to them.
Yeah, because your perception is that they're too difficult to bring round. Yeah. Is this linked to poor quality of data at all, do you think?
How do you mean?
Well, you talked about a lack of trust from the senior levels down to the lower levels. And in those types of organizations, often there is the decision making is at the higher level. Because the data coming out of the organization is not that reliable. So the decisions are not consensus-based decisions. They are, the MD has made a decision, the ops director has made a decision, and there isn't the supporting data for that.
There may be. I think if it sort of comes out of the lack of transparency and lack of visibility of the end-to-end value stream for me. When decisions need to be made somewhere along the value stream, am I trusting in a higher power, or am I trusting in the data? So yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, because the way that you put forward here to break down the barriers by focusing on customer value and the value stream, that requires quite a clear level of data, not complicated data, but very clear. Is what we're proposing to do going to add customer value? Yes, it is. Then why wouldn't we do it?
It's the bringing an organization to move from red tape towards collaboration and focusing on the right principles, and where the kill switch can be relatively easily broken. The breaking down of the built-in barriers is a long and cumbersome process and requires lots and lots of focus, and it requires buy-in from the senior leadership. Because they often create the barriers.
So this would typically be an organization that was perhaps more inwardly focused than focused on their external customers.
Yes.
Yeah. So, as you say, getting the customer value identified, defined, and into the organization and understood would be a very good starting place to break this barrier down.
And I think call it out where you see it. Call it out without over challenging it. Just be really articulate. Here's a barrier. Is this barrier necessary? Or could we, by shifting our focus and by refocusing our values onto the customer and onto the end-to-end value stream, could we do things differently? And here's how we think we could do things differently.
Yeah, and explore it. Okay, number 3. Evolutionary confusion.
I got some animation on that slide out of nowhere. So this is the bane of every project manager's life. But you see this in any change initiative. So say you have a team, a group, a leader, a bunch of people who actually want to change. And you define the scope, the area, the pilot for the change. When people get excited about change, it's quite natural to want to add more. So you're adding this element, you're adding this feature to your app, you're adding this work stream to your project. What you end up then is something that was quite neat and well defined and could be proven and tested and worked through in a really structured fashion, becomes this big shopping list or wish list full of change, and in itself unmanageable. So if you try, there's a really good chance you'll fail. If you fail, there's a really good chance you will fully disengage your organization because you overpromised and underdelivered.
Yeah, I see also here that there is an element of, just to make the words a bit more confusing, clandestine dilution confusion.
What?
Yes. So I often see it when we have projects running inside clients and it becomes quite popular. It's the in vogue thing to be doing. So things are added to it or projects are put in front in the name of it, which I, as maybe the project manager within the company, have no ideas going on. And all of a sudden you find that what was one project has now become 4 projects, all with similar titles, all doing different things and all taking resources. So yeah, it can happen that the one project gets diluted and confused. It can happen that you have multiple projects, all of which become a bit confusing. And all
This is also something that often happens with buzzwords. When whether that's, I've seen digitalization projects, which were called digitalization, but they're basically sorting out your papers from way back when.
Yes.
Or lean is one of those buzzwords where projects are being run under the mantle of lean, which have absolutely nothing to do with lean.
Yeah.
I think the core with this one is to really stay focused on what is achievable and attainable, and identify the scope of your first change, and then identify the scope of your next change. We call it continuous improvement for a reason. It's not do everything in a day. It's try to evolve continuously on what you've got. So incremental change will bring a much bigger shift in both, your organizational performance and your organizational culture than trying to do too much at a time. And here I think it's really important that we keep questioning it, and we keep talking to the people who come with the big shopping lists, and keep them in the conversation, and keep them, give them some level of visibility of the plan to not disengage them.
Yeah. That scoped document, and staying as close as you can to that is very important. Coming back to one point you just made there about the incremental change, the important point for me is that with incremental change, the improvements become far more sustainable than a significant change done over a short period of time. But of course, this is directly at odds with a manager's placement or a manager's career step, which is time limited, and he wants to have some form of fantastic result. So we're combating here almost the traditional career path of a manager, which is a limited time, 1, 2, 3 years perhaps, and then move on. No one gets brownie points for leaving a nice sustainable process behind. Everyone gets brownie points for a big substantive step change.
I think that links back into the values of the organization and how important the values are in culture. Is your role as a manager to create a high-performing team of fantastic individuals who can perform in the process and deliver and excel, or is your job as a manager to get a big tick box because you did that?
Yeah,
you drove a change project. Of course, it's not the latter. And the more modern organizations completely understand that my role as a manager isn't about me, it's about how good a team I create.
So the culture then could be driving and favoring the creation of level 4 leaders, which becomes a barrier for change. Whereas if the organization was driving for level 5 leaders, that becomes an enabler for change.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's something very tangible. You could look at the career structure of managers within an organization and identify easily what type of leader the organization were trying to create.
Absolutely, and it's compared to other things relatively easy to influence if you focus on good quality coaching of your leaders.
Yeah.
Most people can be taught to become more of a level 5, at least communicator, than a level 4 communicator. That's pretty straightforward to do.
Yeah. See, so you're saying these people aren't.
I think we are. I think this might be a talk in itself.
We're in danger of suffering from dilution confusion.
I think so.
So let's come to this one then. Here we are.
Yes, so obviously there's a lot in culture change, and it isn't quite as easy as 1, 2, 3. But you're going to make a lot of headway if you focus on those 3 main barriers, organizational cultural barriers to change. So the first one is about dismantling the kill switch, identify what it is, and then break it through good diagnostics, good probing, and good challenge. Break down the barriers that exist in your organization with focus on the simplicity of first principles, and stop diluting your vision and moving goalposts, but make change something that's incremental, that's collaborative, and that's constant.
That sounds like a good way of putting it, and we'll keep our other conversation for next time, perhaps.
Yes, we will.
But right. It's interesting to see culture is something that can be so powerful, so supportive, so negative, but you can take it on and you can win. So nice simple steps here.
Right, that's us done for this morning. Thank you to everybody who dialed in. I think the next time we're going to talk about, it's an all girls round next time. We're going to talk about dropping the label. And there's going to be more on that soon.
Yes, and I'm going to be excluded from that one.
Yes, you will. Right, thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.